this video is about knowing yourself, especially if you're a big person like me and you want to go hiking and backpacking, things of that nature. You got to understand the cornerstone of building off of everything involving hiking is understanding yourself, understanding your needs, because your needs are going to be unique for you. For instance, I sweat a lot, and I don't just mean in the summer. I sweat all year round. It all depends on how much physical exertion I'm engaged in and how many layers of clothing I'm wearing. To give you an example, it's February right now. It's 25 degrees out. If I were to go outside right now, fully prepared for 25 degree weather, and then start a decent trail, within the first probably half a mile to 3/4 of a mile, I would be sweating profusely under all my layers of clothes. So it's one of those things that you start to understand right off the bat, and that's not really unique to me. That's part of the aspect of physical exertion. You're going to sweat. I just sweat, I think, a lot more than other people. In the summer, I am head to toe drenched. Doesn't matter what I'm wearing. Doesn't matter really the strenuousness of the trail. Just being out in the heat, in the sun for a given period of time, I am going to be completely covered in sweat. It will literally look like I jumped in a stream. So whereas other people are like, well, I want to avoid this because I don't want to get wet, or I don't want my pack to get wet, I don't want this to go wet. For me, going out in the summer, I always have to think, I'm going to be wet, my pack's going to be soaked, everything inside my pack's going to be soaked if I don't prepare for that eventuality. So I ended up having to put a trash bag inside of my pack and put all my sleeping gear and everything else, that like any night clothes or change of clothes or whatever, inside that pack, or trash bag inside my pack, or it's going to get completely soaked just from my body, my sweat on my body. And then, even if once you prepared in that regard by putting a vapor barrier inside of your pack to protect your clothes and your sleeping gear, you still have wet clothes on you. When you get to camp, for instance, and when you're backpacking, you've got clothes that are just drenched, absolutely drenched, and they're not going to get dry unless you hang around camp for a while, having them put them on a line in the sun and just sit there for a while, letting them dry out. And I'll tell you where that doesn't work: Pictured Rocks. We hiked Pictured Rocks in May, July, and September. Each and every time, it was cold enough to where when we would try to hang clothes, we'd hang clothes overnight and let them hang in the morning a little bit. They were never, ever dry because it was just too cold. It's always cold up there. I don't think they ever really get above like 75 degrees. So it was a moot point. So you end up with all of these clothes that end up moist. And then you just have to come to the realization, I'm going to be wearing moist clothes. Because you don't have any choice. You can prepare by bringing additional dry clothes, but then you end up carrying 15 pounds of dry clothes because you're changing every day into dry clothes, and they're all going to get wet by the end of the day. So you have to come to the realization, A, I sweat a lot. B, I've got to get comfortable with wearing moist clothes, because otherwise I'm just going to be going through clothes like crazy. And by the end, I'm going to have this, what started out as a 15 pounds of clothes or 10 pounds of clothes will immediately turn into 20, 25 pounds of clothes, because you'll have all those clothes, only they'll be wet. So I would highly suggest, that's one of the things I learned about myself, to just get comfortable being wet and to try to protect as much of my gear that I wanted to stay dry from getting wet. Other people don't have that problem, so they're not going to tell you to prepare for that problem. That's just one aspect, the sweating, the aspect. Another aspect I've come to know is that I drink a lot of water. Obviously, I sweat gallons, so obviously I'm going to be drinking water. The best example I can give of this is my wife and I went to the Ozark Trail in southern Missouri. And we started off at Taum Falls, which is in Taum Sauk Mountains. And we took the Ozark Trail to Johnson Shut-ins at the trailhead at Highway N. That was a 13.5 mile one-way trip. Our goal, we did this in preparation for our week-long trip at Pictured Rocks near Munising, Michigan. That was going to be a 45-mile hiking trip over the course of 5 days. So we, up to that point, we'd never even done an overnight backpacking trip, let alone a multiple day trip. So we needed to do a test to learn as much as we possibly could about the experience we were going to have. Because once you're up in northern Michigan and they drop you off 45 miles away from your car, it's a done deal. I mean, you don't have cell service. You don't have any real direct connection to the highway. You don't have any real ranger stations or anything to get in contact with people to come bail your ass out. You're committed for the most part. And it's a scary proposition. It scared me enough to be like, we got to go out and really put forward a good test. And that's what Taum Sauk was. It was the test for Pictured Rocks. And in doing that test, we picked something that was going to be strenuous, a long trip, and was going to involve us having to set up camp overnight and then, hike the equal amount of time back out. And hopefully, and my thought process was, if we could do that, we can do Pictured Rocks. So we did it. I guess I should back up a little bit and explain what I used to do before we did that. Before we did that, I used to carry around this igloo cooler pack. And in that pack, I would put 6 liters of bottled water with some ice pack things that you put in your freezer and they cool off, and then you can stick them in there. We had some that were perfectly designed to house 6 liters of water. So I'd fill this pack, 6 liters of water, have those ice packs in between, and I'd take that out on all our day hikes. 6 liters of water is a lot of water. That's pretty heavy. The pack ended up being probably 15 pounds of nothing but water. So when we got to Vario, it's like, this is a godsend. Now we don't have to take as much water. All we have to do is take like a liter bottle or whatever, and then we can just fill it up with the filter. It'll be great. Every water source is new water. Yep. So we bought these 1.5 liter Camelback bottles with the wide mouth that would screw onto the Vario, so it would make it really easy to fill. We're like, this is going to be great. We start out from Sauk. And if you're familiar with the area at all, you know that starting out from Sauk, it's just nonstop water. It's water paradise. It's like, wow, look at all this water. We're not going to have any problems whatsoever finding water. So for the first 5 miles, we did nothing. We just drank our water and la-di-da-da-da and didn't fill up our water at all. And then we hit Prophet Mountain, which is a 6 to 7 mile stretch of zero water. None. It's also a great deal of elevation change, not as great as the AT, but for people who are just starting out on, strenuous backpacking tricks like that, it's got enough elevation change. Plus, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the Ozark Trail, the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, but it's rigorous as hell because of the rocks. It's all just these jagged rocks that are just willy-nilly, and it makes the whole trip, it just slows you down. It really slows you down. And add to that the fact that it was 10 degrees warmer than it was supposed to be. It got up into the mid-70s. And direct sun. It was supposed to be cloudy all day, but instead we got direct sun. So we were halfway on this trail, give or take. We had this much water left in our Camelbacks. Panic set in pretty quick. I mean, it was this is not good because we didn't know the truth. I mean, this is another aspect of hiking that you should know is you got to prepare for your trip. We didn't really prepare. We didn't know the trail that well. We didn't know where the water sources were. We were very uncertain about a lot of things. So at that point in time, we were just like, will we see water again? We didn't know. We honestly didn't. And we went 6 or 7 miles, just parched, dehydrated, freaking out, not knowing what we were doing. There came a point where I was like, I was going to suggest that my wife continue on. I stay with the packs and she go on ahead and look for water, and just take like a 1.5 liter with her in the filter and find water, fill it up, and then bring it back, to rehydrate so we can then trek the rest of the way out. I was scared. I was panicked. I was, losing my mind. I didn't know what was going on, but that was all as a result of the fact that I didn't adequately prepare. I thought I was prepared because I had the filter, and I thought, well, every water source is going to allow me to fill up water. But not taking into consideration that every hike I'd ever gone on before, I was taking 6 liters of water, and we went through 6 liters of water. I thought 1.5 between me, 1.5 on her, that's half as much. Yeah, I should do it. Each experience is different. Each trail is different. Each time of the year that you go out is different. You can go out on a trail in September and drink 22 ounces of water, and that's all you're going to consume on an 8-mile trail. You go out in June, same trail, same distance, and you end up consuming 5 liters of water. It can change that much. It can be that drastic of a change. So that's another reason why you have to kind of learn yourself to know what you're going to need based on these certain, these conditions. So I learned a lot from that experience. I learned that, no matter, regardless of whether or not you have a filter or not, water sources aren't always available. So you have to pack enough water that you're going to need. Now, on the flip side of that, this past weekend, my wife and I went back to the Ozark Trail at the Taum Sauk section. Only this time we took Johnson shut-ins to the south, heading past the Black River and on out to see how far we could get before we set up camp. And then we're going to double back and just do the same route back out. We only got about 6 miles. Talk about out of shape. We only got about 6 miles before we had enough. We had literally, it was pretty rigorous. That the hardest part for us was crossing the Black River. It took us half an hour just to cross the Black River because of how there's just a beach of little jagged rocks, and getting across there required a whole ordeal in and of itself. But by the time we got out, because the water, it was 70 degrees out, but the water was ice cold. But even despite all of this, even though it was half the length of our first trek, and I was sweating profusely, I think I only drank probably 1.5 liters of water. Even though we crossed a river, we didn't fill up because I also had additional water. I over-prepared with water. I was carrying, I believe, about 7.5 to 8 gallons of water on me. Not gallons, liters, I'm sorry. I was carrying 7 to 8 liters of water on me. I only drank 1.5 for the whole trip. Why was I carrying so much water? Because of my paranoia from the first trip. I was so convinced that, because in a lot of ways the conditions were going to be the same. It was going to be hot. Actually, I believe it was hotter this past weekend than it was the first trip we went on. It was the same rugged conditions, and we were certainly unsure of where our water sources were going to be. So I over-prepared like crazy. My wife over-prepared like crazy. We also have a dog that we take on trails with us now, and she needed water. So we're like, oh, we gotta have water for the dog, we gotta have water for us, and we both ended up carrying so much water that we didn't drink. It was crazy. I mean, you can think you know yourself and know how much water you're going to need, but then you get out there and you're like, oh, I didn't end up consuming nearly as much. Other times, wow, I consumed more. It's always good to be prepared, but when you're over-prepared, it causes a lot of strain because it adds weight to your pack, and it just makes your whole experience a little bit more miserable. I mean, my shoulders and my neck are still a little painful because of packing around a 40-pound pack, carrying all that stuff. So learning yourself, learning your limits, learning what you can do and what you're willing to do. There's another aspect. Just like I said, this past weekend, my pack weight was 40 pounds. I'm traveling potentially what we were hoping to do a lot of miles, but I think we only ended up doing about between 6 and 7 miles. And we didn't end up hiking back out because when we made camp, our dog ended up with just a massive amount of ticks. we figured out, I mean, because it's literally February, it's right now February 13th. Our hike was on a February 11th. Cold, winter. But we go out on this trip and it gets up to 70 degrees after snowing 2 days before. There was literally like 5 inches of snow on the ground 2 days before, and it all melted the day before we went out. It was dry as a bone when we went out, but it was apparently enough time for all the mosquitoes and all the ticks to come out. So that's what we were up against when we got to camp. Our dog was covered in ticks. My wife said she picked like 30 or 40 ticks off of our dog. We were set up our hammocks and just laid there for a second, and we were getting bombarded by mosquitoes. But see, we didn't take our bug nets, because why would you? It's early February. It's winter. Why would you take bug nets? There's not going to be any bugs out. So, in a panic, because we didn't know what to do as far as our dog went, with all the ticks, biting it, we were afraid that it was going to cause some real serious health issues for our dog, and we hadn't given it any flea or tick medicine or anything, because it's winter. So I ended up at close to where we set up camp. We broke down camp, went back to the highway that we crossed over shortly before we got there, and I jogged back to our car because I was like, we wanted to get back because we really didn't know what kind of impact it was going to have on our dog. But that's what I mean by I knew by that time we got to that trip, I was happy that I had all that extra water and that we needed all that stuff. But after that jog, it was like I destroyed myself. I'm not going to lie. Once we got to camp and we were faced with that situation of we're going to hammock overnight, we're getting eaten alive by mosquitoes currently, like right now, and our dog is covered in ticks. We are near a highway that we know is 2 miles away from Johnson Shut-ins, like 2 miles away from where we parked. It's currently 6 o'clock. Or no, it was 5:20. We only had an hour of daylight left. So I had to know, because I immediately posed the question to my wife. I said, we can get out of here now. If I leave my pack and leave Sky with you, and you stay here watching the packs and watching Sky, Sky's our dog, and I make my way on the highway back to our car, it should take me it should take me 40 minutes. If it's 2 miles, I can do 3.5 miles on the road. This is after walking like for 4 hours through on the OT and being just physically exhausted from that, not having a chance to really get a decent break. And I'm like, I'll jog back to the car and even cut down on more time just so I can be back before it got dark, because my fear was that it was going to get dark, I wasn't going to find the trail, and it was going to just be a real disaster. But we had to make a split-second decision, and I wouldn't even have proposed it had I thought I couldn't do it. I mean, but that's when you kind of, we've been in those experiences, we've had those experiences before, where you have to make a decision and you have to stick with it, and you got to know you can do it. And a lot of people can push through, but it's just having done it and knowing you can do it is knowing more about yourself and being comfortable in making those decisions. Had I never been in a situation where I pushed myself that far, the prospect of getting back to the car and in a short period of time, or at least before sundown, it was a suggestion I wouldn't even have made. I probably would have just been like, well, let's just camp here and tough it out and whatever. But I made the choice I made, and she stayed behind. I went and got the car and got back before the sun even went down, and we got back home and got the rest of the ticks off of her, and everything was fine. But I think I would have made a different decision had I not been in that situation before and not known that I was capable of doing that. I mean, most people don't even know not most people, but a lot of people who don't hike and don't, walk or run or whatever, don't know how much ground they can cover on their own and in whatever amount of time. I know just at a regular walking pace, I can cover 3.5 miles per hour. Jogging, I can get up to like 4.5. So since I knew that, I knew I could get to the Jeep and back. Had I not known that, like I said, it would have been could have been a completely different situation. So, my main message is to just learn about yourself, learn about what you can do, what you can't do, how your body's going to react to different situations, what your body needs, given different situations and different experiences, and take it from there, because that's going to drastically impact your hiking and backpacking experience. It's going to impact the gear you take, the gear you buy, the clothes you wear. It all plays into that. It's the biggest mitigating factor to everything, to you enjoying or not enjoying your hiking experience. So hopefully you got something out of that. I'd appreciate any comments that you may have, any suggestions you may have, any stories you may have. Leave a comment in the video section, and share your experience as well. I mean, I'd be interested in hearing about it too. And that's it. Thank you.